Welcome everyone to today's crucial discussion on a developing story that sees two Asian giants locking horns on the international stage. Once again, China's ambassador to the United Nations Zhang Jun has formally dispatched a letter to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, a letter that carries sharp criticisms aimed directly at Japan. This diplomatic maneuver centers on the ever-sensitive issue of Taiwan, and it comes hot on the heels of comments from Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi regarding preparations for a potential Taiwan emergency. In response, Japan's chief Cabinet Secretary Kihara has stepped forward to assert that Japan's position on this matter is consistent and unwavering. So what is the full story behind this exchange, and why should you care about a diplomatic letter sent to New York? Let's walk through this together. To understand the present, we need a bit of context. Taiwan has long been a core national interest for China, which views the island as an inseparable part of its territory. Any international discussion or perceived support for Taiwan's separate status is met with fierce and immediate diplomatic pushback from Beijing. Japan, on the other hand, maintains a complex relationship with Taiwan, historically as a colonial ruler and currently as a neighbor with deep economic and strategic ties. While Japan officially adheres to the One China policy, it also maintains unofficial relations with Taiwan and has increasingly expressed concern about peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, especially as tensions between Beijing and Taipei have risen. The immediate catalyst for this incident appears to be public statements from Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi, who referenced the possibility of a Taiwan emergency, likely alluding to scenarios of conflict or crisis. This terminology triggers alarm bells in Beijing, which interprets such talk as external interference or even preparation for involvement in what it sees as a domestic affair. China's response was not a simple press release but a formal diplomatic letter channeled through the United Nations. This is a calculated escalation. Choosing the UN platform amplifies the complaint, giving it a global audience and a veneer of multilateral legitimacy. It frames the issue not as a bilateral spat but as a matter of undermining international norms and the UN Charter itself. Though the exact text of the letter is not fully public, we can infer it accuses Japan of violating the understanding that Taiwan is part of China and of actions that could destabilize the region. Now enter Japan's chief Cabinet Secretary Kihara. His response was measured but firm. He emphasized that Japan's position is consistent. This phrasing is key. It serves multiple purposes. Domestically, it reassures the public and political factions that the government is not recklessly shifting policy. Internationally, it signals to China that Japan is not provoked into changing its stance, while also communicating to allies like the United States that Japan remains a predictable partner. Kihara's statement subtly reiterates Japan's long-held balance, recognizing the One China principle while also stressing the importance of peaceful dialogue and stability across the strait. It is a textbook example of diplomatic hedging, aiming to de-escalate without conceding any ground on Japan's right to comment on regional security. The choice of the UN as a battleground is particularly interesting. The United Nations Secretary General often acts as a symbolic conduit for such disputes, but his power to directly resolve them is limited. China's letter is less about expecting Guterres to take action and more about documenting its grievance on the international record. It is a tactic to isolate Japan diplomatically and to rally other nations that might be wary of increased military tensions in East Asia. For Japan, responding through domestic press conferences rather than the UN directly keeps the discourse focused on its national narrative and avoids legitimizing China's attempt to internationalize the Taiwan issue further. Beneath this war of words lies a profound geopolitical shift. The strategic landscape of East Asia is changing rapidly, with increased military patrols and growing defense budgets. Japan's security concerns about Taiwan are linked to its own national security, given the proximity of the island and crucial sea lanes. Any conflict there would directly threaten Japan's economy and safety. Moreover, Japan's alliance with the United States, which has its own complex relationship with Taiwan, adds another layer. Washington has been strengthening ties with Taipei, and Japan's statements often align with U.S. strategic interests. Thus, China's criticism of Japan is also an indirect message to the United States about the red lines in the region. Looking ahead, this diplomatic skirmish is unlikely to be the last. We can anticipate more such letters, more press conferences, and more calibrated statements as both nations test each other's resolve. The risk, however, is that repeated confrontations in forums like the UN could normalize hostility and erode channels for quiet diplomacy, which are essential for preventing miscalculations. The ultimate goal for all parties should be to maintain open communication, to manage differences, and to ensure that competition does not spiral into conflict that would have devastating consequences for the entire region and the world. So as we close this analysis, remember that diplomatic letters and press statements are the visible tip of a vast iceberg. They represent deep currents of history, strategy and national identity that shape our world. By understanding these moves not as isolated events but as parts of a continuous story, we gain a clearer picture of the delicate dance of power in Asia and beyond. Thank you for joining me in this exploration, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the comments below.